Welcome back, Devils fans. It is your host here, Ace, on Running with the Devils, and Sheldon Keefe was just announced at a press conference at Prudential Center as the new head coach of our New Jersey Devils. I'm going to get into a little bit of my thoughts and reactions to some of what was said. It was a very interesting press conference. Overall, pretty impressed with Sheldon Keefe. Nothing was said that was too earth-shattering or groundbreaking in any way during the press conference, but I think it was fairly informative and a nice little introduction for Sheldon to New Jersey. And we start off with the feed goes live, and Blitzer, our boy Tom Fitzgerald, and Sheldon Keefe are all sitting at a nice table with the backdrop. Sheldon looking like he purchased a nice new beautiful red tie. We're used to seeing him in blue in Toronto. He's adapted to the red, has a nice new red tie, and they start off with talking to Blitzer regarding the whole coaching search and situation. And Blitzer said that Tom ran a terrific process. He interviewed many candidates. He spoke about how he called Fitz during a playoff hockey game and asked if Keefe was going to be available. And then he went on to say how he's followed Sheldon's career from juniors, so on and so forth throughout his career. He did reference the .665 points percentage that Sheldon had as a head coach in Toronto, and then he also made it a point to say how Sheldon made the playoffs in each of his 18 seasons as a head coach. Pretty surface level stuff from Blitzer. I do find it interesting that I guess he was the first one to talk about Sheldon Keefe possibly being the head coach of the New Jersey Devils when he called Fitz. And, proactive on his part. But the reality is we knew Keefe is a regular season winner at least. And the .665 points percentage is impressive. And making the playoffs for 18 years as a head coach at every level, including, winning the Calder Cup in the AHL with the Marlies, is fairly impressive. So I will say, I do like Keefe, and he has been a regular season winner. We know that, and hopefully he could get this group to the next level in the playoffs. But I thought that was very interesting that Blitzer was the one that kind of put the wheels in motion for the hiring of Sheldon Keefe, and then they went to Fitz. Fitz is just gold sometimes. He gave us a new catchphrase. My favorite one of all time will be big game hunting. But now we have the process about the head coach search. He said it was thorough, and he called it the Gauntlet. So now, from the man that brought us big game hunting, we now also have the Gauntlet. Fitz went on to talk about how the process was extensive. He spent a lot of time with great candidates. He was being patient in the process, kind of wanted to see what happened in the first round and see if anything would shake out. And then they went on to talk in depth about the process with Keefe. And he talked about how he had multiple phone calls with Sheldon Keefe throughout the process, culminating in a 3-hour phone conversation that he called a hockey talk. And then ultimately, after a couple exchanges back and forth, Sheldon Keefe confirmed to him via a text message that he was taking the job. And he said that Sheldon checks a lot of boxes I was looking for, talked about keeping players accountable, staff members, someone collaborative with the resources we have, making sure we utilize that, lineup style of play, someone who was a good communicator. I will say, talking in terms of being collaborative and the resources we have, a lot of that to me is frightening just because I do know that this team is very heavy set on the use of analytics in general. And again, I'm not a Neanderthal living in the past. I understand that analytics have a place, and with the technological advances and things with these deep metrics and stats and charts, that's all great. But I do fear that the team has kind of been run on autopilot based on what their findings are with all these analytics. And I've said time and time again that I think there needs to be a human element interjected at points when making decisions in conjunction with the analytics. I'm not just letting analytics paint a picture and then I'm following it. I would just use that as a reference point in making my decision. My fear is that the analytics solely are making the decision, and I hope that Keefe has a little bit more of a backbone or insight into things where he would maybe fight against the popular decision based on the analytics, because as I said time and time again, I just don't think analytics alone really can tell you a full story. And there's a lot of guys, I believe, who have been impact players on deep playoff teams throughout the years that their analytics, if they existed at the time, probably wouldn't have been that great. And if they were playing in today's game, a lot of these guys would probably be in the press box based on the analytics. So I just think that the overusage of analytics is scary to me, and I hope that's not something we see under the Keefe era. But then they finally got to Sheldon Keefe. He said he was excited about the work ahead, developing the coaching staff, getting to know the players, talked about how great our roster is and how the guys are not happy with the season we had, that they're hungry to win. All good stuff, basic stuff you'd expect from a new head coach. Amanda Stein asked him about the parallels to Toronto and the fresh start, and Keefe said it was a great opportunity ahead. He liked the structure of the organization. They were set up for success. He thinks that it's imperative that players are taken care of. And then he referenced, again, sports science, analytics team, and the way it is set up to help him make hockey decisions. The sports science and analytics team stuff, again, I had the whole thing I talked about in the past with the sports science and how these guys claim that goalies couldn't possibly play 60 games because they would shrivel up and die. And it's kind of wild to me. I understand the game has changed, but I don't think it's changed to the level that a lot of these people would like you to believe. And especially when they're talking about how physicality is not a thing in hockey anymore. To me, that's all kind of an analytics initiative. And when you watch the playoffs this year, there's plenty of physicality on display. She asked Fitz when did he know Keefe was his guy for the job, and he said during the 3-hour phone call, he thinks that he realized that he was the guy he wanted, and at some point, Fitzy called around and asked other people that knew Keefe about him, and everyone had great things to say, and that kind of cemented his decision. And when Keefe was asked about the next step in accountability for the team, this was my favorite quote of Keefe during the entire thing, and he said, "Having actions meet ambitions." And I think, to me, that was my biggest takeaway in the quote from Keefe that I think was the most telling and kind of, inspiring in a way. And that, having actions meet ambitions says a lot. I would like to believe that everyone on the team's ambition is to win the Stanley Cup, right? Well, what are you going to do to win that Stanley Cup? Are you going to put in the time in the video room, watch a video, find ways to get better, what you could work on? Are you going to hit the weight room in the offseason, get stronger, get bigger, do everything you can do to give yourself an advantage when the season starts and within the season as well, when the season begins? Are you going to do everything you can to be a Stanley Cup winner? So I do think the having actions meet ambitions is a nice little nugget there that Keefe served up, and I really liked it. That was probably my single biggest kind of quote or methodology, if you will, that Keefe said that I liked, and I took a note to that. So I do think that's a very big one for the group moving forward. And then someone else asked about the video he had posted after he was let go from Toronto, and Keefe said that it was important to him to have closure. And, he was tossing and turning the night before he got canned because he knew he was going to get canned. He got called in for the meeting. He got fired. He went down to that little picturesque lake nearby his house that he said was his happy place, and he recorded that video thanking everyone. Just briefly kind of putting in a closure, if you will, on the situation in Toronto. He said that he thought that was very important. And then shortly thereafter that he recorded the video, he took his wife out to lunch, and Brad Treliving from the Maple Leafs called him and said that Tom Fitzgerald wanted to talk to him. So, he didn't have too much time to really take it all in, if you will. He was fired. He goes and records this video for social media, lakefront. And then he takes his wife out for lunch after that, and Treliving calls him and says, Fitzgerald wants to talk to you. So, that is a nice thing, I guess, from his perspective, is like he gets fired, in the morning, and then at lunchtime, he's already getting inquiries from other NHL teams. So, that has to soften the blow for sure. How many times in life does the average person get fired from a job, and then later on in the same day, you're getting calls from other employers looking to hire you? It doesn't happen in the real world. But I'm glad it kind of happened for Keefe in this scenario, and hopefully it works out for everybody. But I thought that was a very interesting little tidbit on the day he was fired. But Keefe talked about, after talking to Fitz, that he thought it felt right. They were very aligned on a lot of different principles and things. Keefe went on to mention he has reached out to some players to talk surface-level stuff, nothing in depth yet, but just kind of trying to get a feel for the group and talk to the players a little bit. And Keefe, the press conference was pretty much exactly what I expected. I will say, I think his stock, in my book, went up a little bit after the interview because I do think he is very methodical. He's well thought out. And I do think, he does want to win. He's been in hockey for a long time. He obviously had success in the AHL, but now he's looking to win a championship in the NHL. And his regular season records are what they are. I mean, he had great seasons in Toronto. And for whatever reason, with his core four, I've said in previous videos, I think they're just choke artists and they just can't get it done when it matters most. I can't put all the blame on him for that. But he's here now, and hopefully he could bring us to the promised land. Let me see. Then Novo asked him about getting over the hump and what he's learned in Toronto. And essentially he just said, winning in the playoffs is very difficult. And you have to use every day to try to get better, and that he was excited to take over a team with young, hungry players. Again, surface level stuff, nothing mind-blowing was said. And then Novo asked Fitz about the Gauntlet interview process with the coaches and how many guys he did interview. Fitz said he interviewed 8 to 10 guys. He said some of them he knew going into it weren't ready, but they will be NHL head coaches soon, is what he said. Take it for what it's worth. I said a while back, if I was Fitz, I would pick the brains of everyone willing to talk about the team, because it is good to get an outside perspective. And Fitz had also mentioned he wanted to talk to people that may not be biased by opinions or things held within the organization. So to get a fresh set of eyes and a voice from outside to talk to you about your team, knowledgeable hockey people, it's valuable to hear. And so he took the opportunity to do just that and talk to a lot of people, pick their brains about the team. And I'm sure he came away with some interesting observations or thoughts that he may not have seen before because he was too close to the situation. Very interesting stuff from Fitz, but I feel bad for the guys that he interviewed that he knew he wasn't going to hire, that he just wanted to hear what they had to say. Those poor guys maybe got excited that they may have been getting their shot in the league, but that's part of it. And those guys, whoever they were, he didn't name them by name, will likely be in the league in the future, according to what he said. Then Keefe was asked about how much of a factor was the roster, and again, Keefe was very complimentary to the team. He talked about all the skill we have at all the different positions throughout the lineup, and that the players are hungry and not happy with the season the way it went, and they want to get back to work. I mean, that's all you could really want to hear, right? These guys are hungry. They want to get back to work. One of the other weird or alarming things, when someone was asking Fitz a question, he was talking, and I guess the lack of playoff success with Sheldon Keefe. He straight up said playoffs didn't matter, which I thought was kind of mind-blowing. How do the playoffs not matter? Again, I think Keefe was a good hire, given where we are in the trajectory of the organization with the group we have and the ages that they are. I think Keefe was a good hire. But to say playoffs didn't matter, like in his evaluation of a head coach, I think is a little silly. I think playoffs definitely matter. I agree it might not be the end-all, be-all, because as we've seen with Keefe, he hasn't had that playoff success yet in the NHL. He has in other places. But to just say that playoffs don't matter, I thought was very interesting. I mean, playoffs definitely matter. That's how Fitz is going to be, judged on his job performance going forward. So I just thought that was a very weird thing to say. And then Keefe was asked about what did he learn from his first NHL head coach, John Tortorella. Keefe, again, very complimentary about Torts. Keefe mentioned that he had a passion for teaching young players, working with the video with the players. And the biggest things from Torts, he said, he learned was that sometimes you have to make situations that are not easy or not comfortable, and that Torts showed him what was required at all times, and sometimes it created an uncomfortable situation. I think that kind of speaks for itself. Obviously, when you're a head coach in the league dealing with athletes and their expectations and egos and whatever else, it's obviously not an easy thing to kind of juggle. But unfortunately, there's going to be situations, whether it's taking a guy out of the lineup and letting him watch from the press box for a game or two, or maybe benching a guy for a period within a game. There's going to be situations that come up, unfortunately, that are uncomfortable, and to try to navigate that as best as possible and move forward for the betterment of the team and the organization. And that's all you could ask for a guy like Keefe. And then Bruce Beck, an OG. Bruce Beck has been on the news, I feel like, since I was a kid. He asked Keefe what his overall vision for the franchise was, and Keefe very matter-of-factly said the vision is to win the Stanley Cup. That is very clear. And then he talked about maximizing every single day you have, doing your best, making the most of all situations to better the team and get to that end goal of winning the Cup. So I thought that was the way what else is he going to say, right? Winning the Stanley Cup is why you're here. Bill Spalding asked him about his philosophy of accountability. And Keefe said that to him it was giving the players and the team what they need in the moment and being adaptable to different situations. I thought that was a pretty good answer. Again, a lot of these questions are just kind of very surface level, softball-like. I wish some people asked a little more pointed or, juicy questions. Not that I'm like trying to play gotcha when talking to these people and asking questions, but I feel like there could have been a little more substance uncovered. But, this is New Jersey media covering hockey, and most of the time you're going to get softballs and surface level stuff. But let me know what you guys thought in the comments about the Keefe press conference. Overall, I thought it was pretty good. Again, I said his stock went up a little bit in my book. He does seem very methodical, calculated. I do like that. One of the biggest, I guess, scary things for me is that it just seems like throughout the press conference between him and Fitz, all the resources that they talk about to me are just like resources that I feel like are way too utilized. The analytics and sports science and all these things, again, I agree they have a place. They are important to lean on when necessary or to use as part of your overall evaluation process of given players and situations and things of that. But I just fear that we're now living in a world where a lot of teams, including the Devils, are basically just running their franchise solely off of analytics, and I don't think that's the way. I've said time and time again, I do believe there's a human element, the eye test, having a pulse on a team and just kind of like a gut feeling on certain things, I think really matters. And so I hope that the analytics are used maybe a little less than they were in the past or not as emphasized, just so that there can be a little more human decision-making on the part of Keefe, Fitz, whoever it may be, where we're not just looking at spreadsheets and charts and being like, yep, that guy's in the press box tonight because his whatever metric we're looking at sucks. Let me know what you guys thought about the press conference in the comments, anything that was said by Blitzer, Keefe, Fitz, any of the reporters. Throw it all out there. In closing, is there anything I'm forgetting? Oh, I did find it interesting. Someone asked Fitz if he was going to talk to Keefe about personnel things with potential acquisitions and things of that nature, and he said that he would. I always think that is good as well. If you have a coach that you value, especially a new coach who came from another organization, it is valuable feedback to get from him what areas he thinks we can improve and what he might want to see in the lineup. So obviously, I'm sure they talked about a goaltender in depth before Keefe took the job, so I'm assuming that's a given. But outside of that, I'd be curious to know, if Keefe's going to say, I want some more physicality. I think we need to get a little tougher. This team's kind of soft. And if he will go to bat and pitch Fitz to maybe go out in free agency and grab a guy like Bertuzzi that he coached in Toronto. Just things like that I think are valuable for Fitz to have in his ear. And hopefully Keefe analyzes where the Devils could be improved. And obviously I've talked about all season long, physicality, baby. Physicality. We want some of the rough stuff. And I'm not saying to go get 12 Curtis McDermotts. I love Curtis McDermott. He checks the box of heavyweight enforcer is going to come make you pay the price when you do something stupid. But now we need team toughness and grit kind of woven throughout the lineup in the form of guys that play more minutes. A guy like a Bertuzzi. There's tons of them out there. But Bertuzzi's just one that comes to mind because he coached him as well, and he's just a nasty dude that I would love to see. But throw it all out there in the comments. I'll be back soon. I think there'll probably be more Keefe stuff coming out as a result of his introduction day here today. I'll be keeping an eye on all that, and I'll be back soon enough, guys. And hope and optimism, baby. 24-25, New Jersey Devils, hopefully back on top. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz. Until next time, friends, let's go Devils.